for the vote, I will call all of your names off, and you can either yay or nay the vote, and Kelsey can record that because roll call votes are required for virtual meetings. And if you're looking on your screen, if you haven't used Zoom before, if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a mute there. If you click on that with your mouse, it'll mute your microphone, and then that will also show up on the screen so I know who's muted. By all means, if you forget to unmute that and somebody sees your lips moving, we'll let you know that you're muted. Carrie has full control over that, so if I get her line, she has the permission to mute me at any given time if I talk too much. But that's for mute. The stop video, if your video is not showing, you can click on that and either start or stop the video. Like some of you got some pretty narrow bandwidth and some problems streaming the video, so that will, you can keep that off, we understand. This small enough group, typically the discussion is pretty easy amongst all of us, so we really shouldn't have to get into the chat function. But there's a chat function on the bottom. If you clicked on that, you could type a question in there, and then that could be addressed by the chair. Just so you all know, this is live on YouTube. This meets the public meeting requirements for the Public Utilities Commission. So you'll see that on the screen it says live on YouTube. So anybody that logs in or wants to take a look at our commission meeting now can go to YouTube and watch us in person and conduct our business. So any questions about the format, Zoom features or anything like that as far as how it all works? Very good, Mr. President. I think we're ready to move on.
Well, consideration of the agenda would be our first item. So if we can have a motion and a second to approve the agenda, or if there are any changes.
Suki moves to approve.
Perkins second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? We'll call the vote with Vernell's assistance.
Okay, Sinclair.
Yes.
Tucker.
Yes.
Suki.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Foltz.
Yes.
Very good. Good morning, Helen. Glad you can make it.
Good, thank you.
So
Okay,
we
Mr.
have
President.
we
Go
have
ahead.
approval there. We'll move on to routine business. Do we have any public?
Let's take the routine business, the consent agenda first, Mr. President.
Okay, so the consent agenda. Do we have a motion and a second to approve? Are there any questions?
Suki moves the consent agenda.
Tucker will second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye, or we'll have
Yeah, the roll call vote,
roll
please.
call vote.
Okay, Foltz.
Aye.
Perkins.
Yes.
Suki.
Yes.
Tucker.
Yes.
Sinclair.
Yes.
Okay, just so you know, I'll switch that up once. I'll make sure you all pay attention on when I do the roll call vote. Mr. President, we do not have anything for public or citizens comments at this time.
Okay. Financial reports from Pam.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Couple of quick items to note on our cash balances. Our water and wastewater balances, reserves are up. Actually, it's the cash balances are up year to date. 35,000 in the water department over February's cash and 275,000 in the wastewater plant over February. And that is a planned growth on the wastewater side because our debt service with this new wastewater treatment plant is very large, and those payments get made twice a year. So we had to plan for that increase. Cash balances are down in the electric department. We did purchase a bucket truck in February, which drove those cash balances down. And also, this is the time of year when we buy our inventory for our summer projects. So our cash was down in the electric department by 115,000, and that is not planned either. On the net income, water and wastewater net incomes are over year-to-date expected in both of those funds. 12,000 in the water and 30,000 in the wastewater fund. In the electric fund, our sales are down $250,000 year-to-date. And the purchase power cost that goes right along with that is also down 241,000. Those go hand in hand. I know you guys can relate to the fact that our weather this winter hasn't been as dramatic and cold as it typically is. That shows up in our sales and our purchase power cost being both being down. And along with that, our net income is also down 92,000. That's a function of a couple of things. Transfer was increased by $20,000, and also our interest income is down for the year, which I'm sure isn't a surprise to anybody either with financial markets the way they are today. That's all I've got. If anybody's got any questions.
So when you say that our income is down for financial markets, is that from investments or?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any other concerns with the COVID-19? You know, there's business concerns like crazy. Have we done any planning, or do we have any, can you give any consideration to how we're going to deal with this as it continues?
Yeah, Mr. President, I can take that if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I've been watching the electrical load pretty much daily since this thing started in the middle of March, even before we went into the governor's shelter-in-place orders. Believe it or not, March sales were down, and that was related to the weather, but we were actually above March of 2018. So, you know, given our wholesale power costs are down, and then our peak was a lot lower in 2020 than it was in 2019. You remember we had that polar vortex. So if you extrapolate what that saving is just on the transmission cost savings, we'll save about $65,000 this year on avoided transmission costs, because we set a lower peak, and our transmission cost is based on a 90% of our annual peak. As the sales go down, our purchases go down. And the one thing about that is we're buying all of our supplemental power even above, you know, our WAPA. When we don't make those purchases, it actually comes out beneficial to us. So I'm not quite sure what that impact is going to be on the bottom line yet. I'm certainly not in any panic mode because the sales are down. It will impact our total net revenue, but our margins may not be all that bad by the end of the year. So we are keeping an eye on that. And this is also another reason why when utility managers like myself get up on the soapbox and talk about reserves, this is a classic example of why you have reserves. There's two major components that we protect ourselves from these situations in our reserve policy. One is from a natural disaster, a catastrophic weather event, and the other one is significant closings of businesses that may impact our bottom line. There are two components in the reserves that relates to that. So we do have reserves for this. We plan for these types of things, not necessarily a pandemic, but we know that events can come up, economies can swing that will impact our revenue stream. And that is built into our reserve policy, and that's why we have the reserves that we have. So we're set pretty well to ride this out. You know, obviously, our concern is making sure that this thing can get opened back up in a safe and timely manner to get our businesses back in gear and get our local economy going again. But we can ride this out.
So with, I know we have emergency weather situations where we won't be turning people's power off, but do we have any other considerations for if people are hit with unable to pay bills and those types of things?
Yes. Right now that everything has been stayed, and we did that in the emergency commission meeting here in March. We extended the cold weather rule till the middle of May. I'd anticipate that to need to be extended again. There may be some legislation coming down mandating that. We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to do this on our own accord and do the right thing by our customers. Historically, our write-offs are really, really low. So even as we go in and this thing extends on, we'll make arrangements with the customers. We'll set up payment agreements with them. And then when this thing starts breaking loose and they start freeing up some cash, they'll be able to get caught up with us. The big thing is we don't want to have total deferrals on the utility bills, because then when this thing is done, they've got a huge balance out there that they'd have to pay, and it puts them in a worse financial situation than making monthly payments of some sort. So we've been reaching out to the customers that need it. They've been talking to us. Amy's on the call, and she does a really good job of setting up arrangements for everybody. And we're trying to work with them. There has been a lot of money put back into the LIHEAP program for financial assistance, for energy assistance. That's been easier to access for people. So, we've got the means and the tools in our toolbox to help people out through this. We just got to kind of write it out together and get to the end game.
Okay, any other questions on the financial report? Then let's move on to action items. We have a request for donation.
Yes, I can explain this a little bit. In the past, we've provided funds for post-prom and grad bash. I've reached out to both of those organizations, and they're not really sure what is going to happen with either graduation or prom this year. Kelsey holds community meetings 3 times a week, and we listened to the school district yesterday, and they're not sure how this is going to play out for the seniors or what the rest of the school year looks like. I think it'd be a good idea to have this approved, so if graduation does something or grad bash does something, even ends up being late in the summer, there'll be some means there to support the high school seniors and the school kids this year. They're taking it on the chin pretty hard, and I think it'd be nice to support them, so when this thing frees up, they can have their send off from their senior year. And certainly this will be things they'll be talking about with their grandkids in the future of how their school year ended up this year. So staff is recommending approval of both of those, Mr. President.
Do we have a motion?
Tucker, can I make a motion together? Can I do both of them together?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve both items A and B under the action items of donations to grad bash and post prom.
That was Mr. Tucker.
Perkins, second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Mr. President, I'll take roll call vote. Sinclair,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Suki,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Foltz.
Yes.
Then the motion is approved. We'll move on to the general manager's report.
Yes, I'll get into, boy, I realize when we do this, I'm gonna have to sharpen up my pencil on our times here. We're moving along pretty good here. I'll talk about the Missouri River board meeting update. We actually did meet in person in March. It was right kind of before things imploded here. So Missouri River did an interest rate swap sometime in the very end of March. Advanced financing for tax-exempt bonds are no longer available, so they looked at doing an interest rate swap, which is kind of an interesting process for Western Minnesota to look at, because by the bylaws and policies, we can't do that unless the agency we're doing it with is very secure. But they will do an interest rate swap. They refinance some 2012 A bonds that would have been callable in 2023. They actually got that for 0.971%, under 1%. That'll start in 2023. And then there's $50,530,000 of the bonds that they did a swap on. And then in 2015 Series A bonds, the effective swap date is January of 26. It was $30 million. They got that for 1.117%. The 2012 bonds starting in 2023 is going to save $880,000 a year. And the 2015 bonds starting in 2026 will save $833,000 a year. So significant interest savings. quite of a process to go through that, but that's going to save the membership a lot of money. Is going to provide for additional rate stability going forward. And that's certainly what we're all looking for and we need, given the uncertainty today. So a lot of time was spent on the interest rate swaps. We talked about the performance indicators that Missouri River uses to determine how well they're performing for their members. We provided a resolution for purchase of the Marshall Wind Project. There was a bunch of wind turbines, 9 2.1 megawatt wind turbines sit down by Marshall, Minnesota. They were purchased by Western Minnesota, $14.5 million. We were buying the output of those units anyway. The people that built that and developed that project back in the early 2000s wanted to sell it. So Western Minnesota purchased that and we secured that, and it actually lowered our purchase power contract by purchasing those wind turbines. Extended the distribution maintenance agreement to Lakota and Northwood, North Dakota and Faith, South Dakota on a contract and per project basis. Started a pre-buy material for the Ortonville Johnson Junction transmission line rebuild. That's something that's been in the works for the last couple of years. That's to provide additional capacity for another wind farm that's going in South Dakota. They'll need access to that transmission system. Lead times on some of that equipment is getting pretty long, so we're pre-buying that before the rest of the contract goes out for bid. Approved a joint pricing zone with Mid-American Energy Company for a couple facilities in Iowa. We took a look at Bright Energy Choices and how that may look going forward with reporting and recalculating the non-carbon footprint of Missouri River and the membership. There'll be more information coming out on that in May and June. Not quite sure how that's going to turn out for us. They had some problems with their spreadsheet when we looked at that, so they had to correct that and get that back to us. They had resolutions for the service of Dave Shelkoff and Bill Schwant. Both of them are off the board now. And then with Bill leaving, there was a little bit of a board shuffle. Scott Hain was appointed to fill the vacant position as vice chair on the second vice chair on the Missouri River Board. And then Guy Swenson from Barnesville was appointed to fill Schwant's unexpired term on the Missouri River Board. And then on the Western Minnesota Board, Bill was the president. Since he left, Scott Hain moved up to president. Brad Roche is actually vice president, but he declined to move up because he's retiring here in August. So Scott Hain was appointed president. I was moved up to the secretary, and Ted Cash was appointed as treasurer. And then there'll be another shuffle here in August sometime on that board, probably when Brad Roche retires. So that in a nutshell is the Missouri River Board date. If there's no questions, I'll continue on to the Midwest Board meeting.
Please do.
Okay. So we had a Midwest Board meeting. We actually did that by conference call instead of meeting. We were supposed to do this in Washington, D.C. Obviously, we did not go, and it's a good thing we did not go. So we conducted just a phone conference. Again, that went fairly well. New manager Jim Horan is working pretty hard with the Senate and has been pretty active in D.C. up until recently, trying to get purchase power and wheeling again and the full understanding of everybody in DC on how purchase power and wheeling works and what we need it for. Western States Power Corporation talked about the funding that they're providing for the Bureau, the Corps, and WAPA, and they're just about at the 50% funding level for 2020. So they've spent about $50 million out this year already. 91 current projects are in the works for funding. Mark Gabriel talked about what WAPA is doing. If you noticed on our Facebook page, we provided a little video clip from WAPA on how they're keeping the lights on for everybody, and we certainly appreciate that. They've, as of the end of March, they have between 700 and 900 employees in their corporate office working from home in any given day. They have the capacity for 1,000 people to work from home. Just some people just are pretty set that they want to go into the office and work in the office. So they're trying to do all the attempts they can to keep everybody healthy. They've implemented no public access limitations on all of their facilities. They're still trying to get a CFO hired. That was due to retirement. They're shuffling some things around there. So WAPA's doing their portion to keep operations going, and it's challenging for them because they actually, when you think about everybody that's in the power plants, I think they've been bringing some campers in, sequestering people at the facilities for a couple of weeks at a time and then sending them home and rotating people through. So as spread out as they are in all the facilities they have, the critical nature of their facility is pretty tough to keep them running. So it's a challenge for them. On the administrative side of Midwest, again, with Bill Schwant leaving, that opened up a vacancy on the in the chair lineup. Tom Boyko from East River Electric in South Dakota was the secretary. He got nominated to move up to vice president. That opened up that position for secretary in the executive committee. I was fortunate enough to get a nomination and approved, so I was voted in as the secretary for Midwest. So that means in 5 years, I'll end up being the president of the Midwest Electric Consumers Board. So that's the big and little of it all for the Midwest meeting. You ready for the big hoo-ha on the COVID-19 pandemic and how we're handling that?
Yes, please.
Well, Andy can expound on this a little bit, and so can Rob when it comes to reports, but they've split up the crews, divide and conquer, if you will. I think it's working very well. Andy has video meetings with his staff every morning. They're dispatching from their homes. They've had their trucks at their residences for a few weeks now, and it's working very well. They're getting a lot of work done. There's just a lot of information that we need to get into our GIS system that we haven't had time to do, and they're knocking that out like crazy, which is good. Some of the heavy projects take a little bit longer because we're still trying to keep people away from each other and keep them healthy. So that's a little bit of a challenge for them. Our big goal through all this, especially for our outside operations crews, is to keep them all healthy. You know, I talked to Kelsey about this as him and I were doing planning here a few weeks ago, and I told him, I says, the unfortunate part of it is, and as you can see when you look out the window this morning, winter is not over yet. And we're in that time of year where ice storms could happen, and then we're going to quickly migrate from ice storms to wind, hail, and severe weather events. The last thing any of us need right now is to have our crew come down with a bad case of COVID-19 and then get pounded by a severe storm. That'd be very, very challenging. I'll be honest with you, I'm very nervous about that. So that's why keeping our workforce healthy. And we got a little bit of a shot of rain here a week ago, and Kelsey sent me a text and he goes, "You had to talk about ice, didn't you?" I go, "Yeah, my bad." But it's the reality in which we live in. Take a look at some of the things going on in the southern part of the United States. Some of those areas have been hit with some pretty gnarly storms. I just dread being vulnerable like this with the possibility of our workforce getting sick. So doing everything we can to keep them healthy. We do, you know, Kelsey probably talked about this a little bit too. We did make a split on the office staff starting on Friday. That's going to help keep everybody safer and healthy in here. So we're doing everything we can. This takes it. I know Kelsey's got a lot of time in this COVID-19 thing. This is a big, big time burner. There's a lot of time spent on trying to keep the wheels turning and trying to play the chess game of what's going to be our next step and how are we going to do it correctly or the best we possibly can given the data we have as of this moment. So it's been a challenge for us. I think we're doing a pretty good job of it. Services to the public are still very strong. We haven't heard any complaints or anything about that. Everything's in full swing as far as operationally. So hopefully we're doing a good job serving the public. Any questions on that?
No, we sure do appreciate not only your team, but the entire city, what they're doing to keep things moving and to prepare us for it. So make sure you know from our commission that we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Just a quick moving on to item D, Mr. President, the RP3 designation update. I talked about this a couple months ago. We did get this along with item E, the APPA Safety Award. We were granted the APPA Safety Award for no lost time accidents last year. So good job to everybody. That helps in a lot of ways. It helps in our RP3 designation, and it also helps in our mod rating for workman's comp. So it's a good job to everybody. I'm proud of everybody being safe, looking out for each other, looking out for themselves. That's a big kudos to the outside field crews. Then the RP3 designation, we did go from, let's see, we went from gold to platinum, I believe, and platinum, and we just missed diamond by a couple points. So we are working diligently to close those gaps over the next 2.5 years. And that RP3 designation is a big deal. That if we ever go out for bond rating again, that would help us for that, but it also benchmarks us against utilities across the country. And we're in the top tier when it comes to workforce development, safety, system innovation and design and updates, and financial responsibility. Those are the areas they typically look at. So we can hang our hats and be proud that we're up there with the upper echelon of utilities across the country in public power, and we're doing a good job. So it's nice to see that. And then update on the AMI-AMR program. If you remember last month, I requested permission to start negotiating with vendors for meter changeouts. I discussed that with the Missouri River staff and come up with a game plan to meet with those vendors. We got back and the wheels came off the train. So I'm going to reach out to Missouri River, Brad Lang at Missouri River again the end of the week or first part of next week, and talk to him about what their schedules look like for the vendors, what the backlog is appearing to be, and then try to get this thing rolled out as soon as the economy and mobility opens back up. This is no doubt going to put us behind. I was hoping to be started with changeouts by this time of year. Our crews are still deploying gateways, getting all the infrastructure in to communicate with all those meters. Andy and I have talked a little bit about possibly letting the crews start doing some meter deployments ourselves. And we may do that. If this thing continues on to where we're going to be out a couple months before we start getting together, we may start doing some of those challenging meters ourselves, get those knocked out if we can, and then maybe even get a little bit better price break from the contractors when they come in to do this. Along with those lines, Missouri River always talked about going to a time of use rate in 2023. And I talked to Tom Heller week before last. They actually may look at deferring that for a year, depending upon how long this thing takes to recover. They know that getting AMI, AMR programs started right now is non-existent. So this is very much one of those things that's up in the air. We'll see how it goes for getting started ourselves and contractors going. I just want to let you know that we are going to be delayed on this program a little bit, and it's all COVID related. So, Mr. President, I'd entertain any questions if anybody has any.
Hearing none, let's move on to department reports. Andy?
Well, I think Brown pretty much recapped everything we've been doing, so. But yeah, the guy's been working on the AMI project, getting all the backbone stuff in place for that. And then working from home, doing a lot of mapping. We're keeping up on our day-to-day stuff, fixing lights, hooking up services. It's actually been going very smooth. It's working out pretty well, working from home, so. Anybody have any questions?
Oh, but do me a favor and knock on some wood after you said that. I do have one thing. We really appreciate having you in this role. Really difficult to pop in, relatively new as a supervisor. I'm sure you've had some words with Roger about leaving you in this mess, but we really appreciate having your expertise and your whole team on board at this point in time.
I've been practicing social distancing my whole life, so this kind of plays right into what I like to do.
All righty, well, thank you.
Thank you.
And Rob?
Good morning. Yeah, we're doing kind of the same thing with our crews, split off, and now the operation staff that we have at the E2Q plant are separated out, doing 1 week here and then 1 week away, where they're taking the O&M manuals home and also the video stuff and watching videos on the plant equipment, and they're doing a log of their activities while they're there. And then they're available, you know, by phone, or if we have an emergency where we have to have somebody come in, we can have them come in. Other than that, the construction is going good. If you've seen down here, they've moved all the job site trailers across. They're starting to do some grade work. They're starting to do the stormwater work, and then that'll get into the paving and blacktop, so curb and gutter and all that good stuff, and then we can actually not track sand everywhere when we walk around. Operations are going really nice. Numbers are still great. Digesters are coming around really nice. Centrifuge is working good. This last week, it started to really produce good, clear supernatant coming off of it, or centrate. As a whole, it's going well. Staff are working, doing a great job. All pretty independent. You know, got lift station. Kyle's taking the truck home, working remote from there. And Bucky also. Chad reports to the water plant. Just keeping our isolation and still trying to move forward with stuff. So all in all, I think it's going really well. That's it.
Any questions for Rob? I also have to say the same thing on you. I would imagine you thank Scott for the nice opportunity to jump in with the E2Q and deal with that whole thing, and then now the COVID-19. But we greatly appreciate your experience and your knowledge and your staff in this situation.
Well, thank you. And the staff has done a great job. They've all been showing up and doing the best they can. So it's been nice.
Thank you. And I assume we don't have Pratt.
No, Mr. President, we don't have City Engineer Pratt on the line, but I would like to have Bridget jump in and just give an update on what it looks like as far as energy conservation, what she's been doing with key accounts.
Yeah, good morning. I have been providing updates when the SBA announces new information regarding the businesses and opportunities for them as far as loans and grants. I've been reaching out to all the key accounts, sending information out to them, letting them know that we're still here. I'm still here by phone, email. We've had a few projects come through, not a ton, but there's still projects, lighting retrofits going on. So that's good. And mainly just letting them know, we're still here. We cannot do audits, but we can still process rebates and help them through anything. Even just basic utility questions if they need, or city questions if they need somebody, a go-to person that they can reach out to me and I can try to help facilitate that question and find them answers. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is that we also received a Certificate of Excellence and Reliability. So kudos to Andy's crew. Vernell was talking about, our achievements and different things we should be proud of, and that was one that we received as well. So things are good on my end as well.
Well, that's the kind of reports we like to hear. Greatly appreciate everybody's efforts, and let's hope we keep hearing good news. Anything else for department reports? If not, let's move on to City Administrator Kelsey Clem.
President, I don't have too much. As Vernell mentioned, this is a disruption, but we still have to continue to function. We have a couple of projects that we have out to bid. Our police department bid opening is April 16th, this Thursday. So we're looking at having a special council meeting on the 28th to consider those bids. We also have a project for the airport project that is out for bid. I believe that's May 6th is the bid opening for that. That's the fencing project around the perimeter of the airport. John Pratt will be asking the city council this afternoon for approval to go out for bids for the South Washington project, and hopefully have a bid opening sometime in May and approval in May. Otherwise, operations is more of the same. Our police department's doing split scheduling, again, trying to limit exposure, letting them take squad cars home as they can. Public Works is reporting to 3 different buildings, again, trying to keep the crews split to reduce any exposure. City Hall, we reduced our hours a little bit. We went from, instead of 8 to 5, we went to 8 to 4. Our public lobby is closed, and then we're doing that split scheduling, trying to, again, reduce exposure here and let people work from home when they can. Liquor store operations We reduced the hours a little bit from closing at 10 o'clock to closing at 8 o'clock. Again, we put some of those standard protocols in place that you see at any of the grocery stores or Walmart. You know, we have tape on the floor trying to encourage social distancing. We put plexiglass up. Our employees have masks to use. So try and do everything we can to keep our employees safe. And, you know, I think you've mentioned it already, but our employees have been great through this whole process. They've really stepped up, done anything that we've asked them to do, and be patient with us too, as we try to implement these different things. And again, they've been very understanding. Does anyone have any questions just for the city?
This Gio, I just have a question. I don't know, I haven't thought about this the other night, but you know, so obviously you guys aren't gonna, the city is not gonna get food and tax or food and tax money. So the, you know, food and beverage tax money, I should say. So what's that gonna do for, I mean, this could go on a little bit. Is that gonna put you behind on some of your bond payments and some of that kind of stuff?
Commissioner Tucker, that's a great question. The good news is our food and beverage tax money is really dedicated to capital projects. So what it means is probably some projects get put off. We really don't have any debt service requirements that are tied to it, which is good news. So I don't see any debt service shortfalls because of it. But the reality is we probably just have to postpone some projects that we had anticipated doing. Some trail projects and stuff just have to get slid back. You know, otherwise, you know, as you mentioned for utilities, we've talked about the same thing here at the city. What is our revenues impact? You know, so far they're somewhat limited. You know, we're concerned about the police department project too, because that's sales tax based. We haven't seen what the sales tax reports are going to be yet for March. You know, we expect them to be down, not completely gone away, because we still have businesses that are open collecting sales tax, but how big of a hit it'll take, we don't know. You know, property taxes so far, they haven't changed anything on the collection for property taxes. There's some talk about maybe deferring that. You know, that could impact our revenues. You know, the state forecast looks pretty bleak. I don't see the governor cutting LGA, you know, mid-year this year. I think that's still safe. Again, we'll continue to monitor that. So largely our revenues are somewhat still intact. I mean, we haven't seen a big hit on anything. I mean, actually our liquor store sales are up. You know, big picture, GL, I'm looking at next year. You know, I think there's gonna be a lot of pressure for us to put a cap on our tax levy for next year as businesses are recovering, and that's going to be a challenge. We have, you know, we already have wage agreements in place with all of our unions. We know unless anything changes, we're going to lose about $90,000 in LGA for next year, and that's about a 2% levy increase right there. So I think in the short term, I think our revenues look okay. Long term, that's where I'm getting a little more concerned about how we move into budget season in August and what's our pressure is going to be on next year's levy.
Thank you for the good explanation. No, I can see, I think you're right. I mean, that's what's gonna be next year or whatever. So you guys are already starting to talk about pushing off projects and delays and that kind of stuff then, basically.
Any other questions for Kelsey? Then we'll move on. Future commission meetings.
Yes, Mr. President, if I can jump in here for a little bit. Not sure what our future holds. I'd almost say we should plan for having this meeting again this way for May 12th. That'll be our next commission meeting. It surprised me a great deal if we were able to get together by that time, but we can be optimistic and hope for the best, but if not, we'll do this again on May 12th. The other thing that we've got in the schedule would be for July was Missouri River is planning on coming to Detroit Lakes for their planning session and strategic planning meeting, the 8th, 9th, and 10th of July. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. That's quite a ways out yet for us. We're hoping we can have life back to somewhat normal. If that happens, we may end up having some social activities here for the commission with the Missouri River Board and some other things that I'll reach out to all of you individually and get some ideas from you on what you might think we might be able to do there from the Missouri River Board if that comes to fruition. The Missouri River annual meeting has been canceled. That will be held by a conference call, probably similar to what we're working with this morning. I'll give you some information on that if you want to sit in on it. They're trying to make sure that they get enough of the delegates on that call to have a quorum to conduct official business of Missouri River in western Minnesota on May 6th and 7th. MMUA conference is still scheduled for August 24th, 25th, 26th. And we'll be talking about that more as we get closer to that for sign up and what that looks like. So just last updates on the calendar, Mr. President.
Anything else to come before the commission? Well, that went faster than I had anticipated. Thank you, everybody, for everything you're doing. Appreciate you making changes so we could meet this way. And I guess we'll plan on doing it similarly next time unless we get some really good news.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Thank you.